I'll just say that I think we've all bought into a lie, and the lie is that strength is that power and dominance, and really strength is comes from love. It comes from your heart and your intentions.
Welcome to Leadership Disrupted. I know I say this a lot, but today's episode is really special. First of all, we have TJ Jones with us a second time. So TJ is coming back and we're going to take our conversation even further. TJ is what I like to call a working leader. He is someone with a job and accountability for leadership development to an employer day in and day out. Not a keynote speaker, not a consultant who flies in, does some magic and then flies out. Although certainly TJ has done his fair share of consulting and advising, but he is not one of those folks who pontificates. He's one of those folks who lives what he talks about, embodies what he talks about, shares what he talks about with people, and they all have to live with that and work with that day in and day out. And there's a certain, I think, discipline that comes from that kind of relationship with people, as opposed to, and not judging keynote speakers, not judging consultants. I have lots of friends who do exactly that. It's perfectly fine, but it is qualitatively different than someone who leads day in and day out and has to live with the leadership that they're providing day in, day out. So with that said, TJ, welcome to Leadership Disrupted. I also have to mention, of course, you're the author of the book, The Caring Warrior, and you have a new book coming out, which we're going to talk about a lot, called Awaken the Power. And I just finished reading Awaken the Power last weekend, and then did a reread, as I told you in the pre-interview. I did a reread of chapter 9, and I have so many questions, so many thoughts about that. But before we dive into any of that, is there just anything about you that you would like to maybe fill in the gaps or just tell a fuller story about you and who you are before we dive in?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. And I always enjoy our conversations and interactions. I'm just a guy, you know, um, like so many people, I've had the career trials and tribulations, the life trials and tribulations, times where you feel like you're on top of the world, and other times when you couldn't feel any lower. The challenges of being a husband, father, uh, and all the wonderful things that come with that. Years of travel. One year I tallied 185 nights in a hotel, and yeah, I'm top member in a number of different,
Mhm.
uh, you know, companies that handle travel, and I'm not necessarily proud of that, but it does say something about the life that I've lived, and I've been very, very fortunate. I'm very grateful, and I guess what's brought me to this place where I'm getting to chat with somebody like you, which I'm grateful for, is that I've chosen to share my experiences with others. And
Mhm.
a lot of times that comes from the difficulties. Those are the times when we're not sure how to handle something. Those are the times when we question ourselves. Those are the times when we've already acted upon something or said something and felt like we made a big mistake. The times when you're witnessing, observing leadership behavior or cultural things on the job or in your community that just don't feel right and just aren't right. And I've always had this burning desire to connect with people. And as I've grown and gone through these things, I've decided to share. And I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to be here with you right now doing that.
You mentioned things you're observing in your community, things we are all observing in our communities, in the world in general. And I think maybe that's a great place to start, because I remember when you and I first spoke eons ago, whenever that was, we both shared this view that leadership in general was in a bit of a crisis, because there aren't a lot of great examples of leaders who are meeting the moment. There are examples. There definitely are examples of great leaders who lead in a certain way, in a way that's aligned with that whole concept of the life-giving sword that we talked about before, and we'll talk about that more here. But
Sure.
but it's more rare than ever. And I think people, particularly young people, at the same time that they're yearning for deeper leadership, they're also resistant and skeptical and cynical and doubtful that leadership can be that, because it seems like those who are succeeding most today are not reflecting what you've described. If you look at, if you just look at what social media is telling us in terms of who's
Mhm.
rising and who's falling, if you look at what the news is telling us in terms of who's getting and gaining as leaders, it appears to be, it's more about who you know, it's more about gaining an edge, it's more about putting one over on others. I don't see many leaders who are talking about truth and then also telling the truth. So I don't know. What I guess, what's your view of the world we live in today, and how our world is struggling in terms of leadership role models, examples in that world, if that makes sense?
It totally does. It's a troubling time. Not to cast a cloud over things, but some shift in the ether, and through the various things that have occurred in the last couple decades, there seems to be this vacuum where what's been allowed for is aggressive, dominant, highly hyper competitive. Getting an edge on somebody is the goal, but it's often done in a manner of anger or speaking badly about other people, and that's upsetting. And you don't have to look far. Turn on the news, go out into the world, and there are many examples of that kind of interaction, that kind of leadership. And call me ideal or idealistic, and that's okay. But I would like to see more of that showing up with ideas and convictions and policies, visions and strategy for an organization or a community, but with a loving heart and with that desire to ask yourself before you speak, am I speaking the truth? Am I is this bringing some value to the other or others? And then finally, am I doing it in a kind way? So I think there's too little of that right now.
And I took that from your first book, The Caring Warrior. Your first book was not The Warrior, it was The Caring Warrior. And it definitely does not shy away from the importance of having that warrior energy, that warrior spirit, that warrior fight, that warrior bravery, that warrior willingness to step into the battle, but with a heart, but with caring, but with a soul. And with those values that many of us grew up with in terms of ethics, integrity, honesty, um, uh, being a warrior to help the downtrodden, being a warrior to help those who can't help themselves, being a warrior for others, as opposed to raising yourself up, raising your tribe up, your group up, or whatever. And that tension between caring warrior really grabbed me when I first read your book. And since then, um, I happen to be I've Nordic heritage, so I've spent a fair amount of time exploring my Nordic heritage. So I'm very familiar with the lore of the Vikings, like the real lore, not the lore on television. Although I watch all those shows, watch all the Viking
Yeah,
shows, but
me too.
you go to the real lore, and you find that Vikings were, in fact, yes, they were barbaric. They were warriors. They were killers. They were not always good people, but they were awfully good to each other. And Viking leaders weren't anointed. Viking leaders were determined by the tribe, by the group, and they continuously re-earned their position as leaders by the way they treated the people who followed them. And there was I, a strong sense of caring and love for your tribe of people, continuously re-earning your leadership role in that sort of Viking culture of old. And I think there are other cultures that we might consider to be warrior or barbaric cultures. That classic type of leadership actually was a lot more sensitive and caring than I think we perceive today. Today you see those cultures through the lens of film and movies and TV, or just our own culture. And the warrior ethos of today is very different than what one might have experienced 1,000 years ago in terms of the warrior ethos.
Mm.
And I think we've lost that sense of what it means to be a strong leader, strong, and yet also equally loving and caring, giving, and wanting to lead, to lift them up instead of just lifting yourself or your family up. And I read your new book, as I said, and I think you told me that originally you wrote the new book, Awaken Your Power, as it's kind of a rewrite of the first book. But I didn't experience it that way. Honestly, I would say to somebody, read the first book, and then when the new book comes out in September, I would read the second book as well, because I felt like your second book was putting more of a fine point on what you were advising people to do. The second book, really, I felt like I walked away with marching orders, like a real plan in mind, a sense of where my personal gaps might be and how I might fill those gaps. But maybe you tell us, what was your intent in writing the second book?
Yeah, originally, I wrote the first book 10 years ago, and a lot has happened in my life since then, personally, professionally. And so I thought it would be different now.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And when I look back at the original, I was first time out, just kind of a hack. I'd always been into reading and had lots of ideas, and was a teacher and a trainer in my professional life, and I guess you could say a communicator. But now I'd had that experience under my belt, and I thought, if I could do it again, I would try to do less and cover less of the topics that I tried to do at first. I felt like this idea of the caring warrior, that dichotomy, that tension, like you said, applies to so many things and so many people. And think I set out in that first book just to finish it and just to be able to do it and get it published. You know how that is. But also to touch on all those things.
Yeah.
And, you know, people people have told me that they enjoyed it and got something out of it, and that's great. But I set out to maybe try to do less, maybe focus a little bit more on, the origin of this idea of a life-giving sword, or as you said, that warrior, that leader that shows up, that loves their people, cares about their people, is not sort of wishy-washy about much, but can hold those opposing forces all at once.
Yeah.
We, have sort of, two conflicting situations together and be able to hold on to that, which I believe it was Einstein. Someone said that that's one of the marks of intelligence, is to be able to do that. And so I thought I'd like to go back and talk more about the philosophy where this sort of came from, and give people maybe a little more of a philosophical, spiritual, internal look at it, and let some of the leadership lessons, the parenting lessons, the professional lessons be sort of an outgrowth of the book. And man, I had so much fun doing it, and I hope that people will enjoy it and get a lot out of it.
So you wrote your first book 10 years ago. You got a new book coming out this year. It's a weird coincidence. The same is true with me. 10 years ago, I wrote my first book, Workplace Poker. I had thought about writing books for a long time, but I don't know if it's just that I don't have it in me, or I felt I needed to wait until I really had something to say, like something to say that wasn't already being said by 200 other people, and it took a while. And then after the first book came out, I was fine with it. In fact, I was really happy with it, and I wanted to write a second book, but I didn't feel like I had a second book in me yet. It took 10 years to feel like, okay, yeah, I can feel it. It's like there's more there. Now, in my case, the first book was from the employee perspective. Like, how do you navigate this, ever more complex world of work with all of the interpersonal dynamics? How do you navigate that? And then the second book is more from the leader's perspective. How do you lead people who are trying to navigate this world and confronting the reality that employee engagement diminishes year after year after year, no matter that we're spending billions of dollars every year to try to boost employee engagement. The last numbers that I read a few weeks ago, employee engagement is down another 2% this year compared to previous years. They're more cynical about their leaders. They're more doubtful about the organizations that they work for. They still show up, and I think here's the challenge for a lot of leaders. Those employees show up. They look like they're doing their job, and they are doing their job, but they may be giving you 50% while appearing to be giving their all. And so you don't even see what's left on the floor. You don't even see what doesn't come into your office, because they're doing whatever is required to do the work, but you don't gain the benefit of their full spirit, their full engagement, their full mind, their full soul. And so late, at some point, when those employees are asked in an anonymous survey to rate how engaged they are at work, when they feel comfortable, when they feel safe to tell you not you the truth, but someone else the truth, they'll say, well, yeah, I probably give whatever percentage. It's not pretty. And then managers, the latest Gallup survey has indicated that manager engagement is also drifting downwards now. So we have both
Right.
managers and leaders and employees who are just giving less and less to the job. And I think a big part of it is a leadership issue. They're not being drawn into the work by their leaders, by leaders who see them, by leaders
Yeah.
who prioritize them, by leaders who connect the dots for them to say, hey, here's the work that needs to be done. Here's what this means to you. Here's why your contribution is important. Here's why I want to lift you up to help you achieve this, whatever this might be. That's not happening. What's happening instead is, here are your KPIs, here are your OKRs, here are your goals. Now here's your bonus. Hey, if you achieve these goals, we'll pay you a bonus. And we think we're driving engagement because we've created a financial incentive or whatever. Does that prompt any thoughts, TJ?
A million thoughts. Yeah, you've got my head reeling and spinning. It's a tough thing to tackle. And as you've alluded to, the levels of engagement, the levels of quiet quitting, as it's often called, are super high. I wasn't aware of that new statistic that engagement levels have gone down. I'm not surprised. I think that the practical or the financial always seems to come out higher priority than the personal. And the difference there is that the personal has different needs. The personal has I shouldn't say a shelf life, but has a lot of inputs that are required for it to be solvent. And, the financial, it's really, blocking and tackling. It's the forecast, hitting the forecast, the customer targets, the amount of times you see the targets. You've heard it before. And when you get underneath those surveys and the feedback, when people feel safe doing it, you find out that they want to feel connected. They want it to be meaningful. They want to have leaders who care about them. And if they're not just an individual contributor who wants their immediate supervisor, manager to care about them, it's, as you alluded to, that first line leader, which, by the way, may be one of the most difficult jobs out there. I could talk for days about that because I spent a lot of my career in a role like that. But people in their leadership roles want to have someone and others that they can look to who they know actually care about them. It helps to feel like your work is meaningful. It doesn't matter what it is. You want to see how that work applies to the world and how it helps in some way. And everything that's put out there that's legal has some value, to others and to how things work. I'm sure there are products that people can think of different examples and in certain companies, but just to speak in generalities, people also want to feel like they're growing. And this to me is one of the things that maybe doesn't rise up as much in those surveys, but professional growth, professional development, an opportunity not just to get promoted, but to have learning experiences and maybe within their current role to advance to a higher level position and to have opportunities to stretch. I think that is a human need. And I also think that is a professional need that people have. And if those things are missing, that that sense of someone cares about me. I'm doing meaningful work, whatever it is. It's like the old, I think it was Kennedy who went to NASA, and the janitor, he introduced himself, and, what is it that you do? And the janitor said, I help put people on the moon, Mr. President. That mentality is pretty cool.
Absolutely.
People yearn to feel that way, and it's not always easy to do that on your own. We need those inputs, and that certainly helps. Something that you may have saw in the may have picked up in the book is that we do have some basic needs, and we want to know that we matter, that we bring some value every day to the people we love, to our community, to our work. We also want to know that we're connected. We're connected to others, that there's that exchange of interplay, love, humor, people working together to achieve a common goal. That connectivity is so important. And then, not last or least, but safety. We want to feel safe. And so, back to this issue of engagement, if people don't feel safe in their work, whether it's, is my job safe, but also am I safe emotionally, psychologically in this environment that I work in? If they don't feel like they matter or the work that they're doing matters, that's a vacuum.
And so take everything you just said and imagine an organization or just a team or a leader who's introducing the use of AI tools to his or her team. I've seen examples on both ends of this spectrum. I've seen organizations essentially introduce AI tools as efficiency tools that are going to replace humans, replace human activity. I've seen a sales team whose a part of their job was to send out emails to prospective clients, and in the past they had customized those emails so each client got slightly different email. Of course, generally things were similar, but customized to the point where you mentioned something personal, you mentioned something from the past, or you would just adjust those messages based upon your knowledge of the client, the industry, the culture, the whatever. And I have one company I'm familiar with where they've replaced that function. Now AI writes all of those emails. And AI, they've determined, does a much more efficient job of searching databases. LinkedIn quickly determines how to customize the outgoing content for every particular account. And they've taken the sales reps out of that role now. And from their point of view, they've just made it more efficient. They've made it easier. You guys don't have to do that anymore. But I had several sales reps who actually lamented and felt like not only was it not as good, I had one young woman said to me, yeah, the emails are longer now. They're longer and they share more data. Like there's more detail in those emails, but it just has a vibe. It has an AI vibe that feels cold. And she said also, I don't get a chance to touch those emails. I get copied on them, so I know what went out, but I don't get a chance to edit them because they think that would take me too much time to do any like fine tuning and editing. And she just felt so deflated to be taken out of that process. And the jury is still out in terms of whether it's actually more effective or less effective. But that use of AI in that way, I contrast that with other employers who are helping to grow their teams. They want their teams to be augmented by AI, but they're building capabilities within their people to leverage AI tools so that it doesn't feel like something I have to fear. Doesn't feel like something that's going to take my job. They're acknowledging AI absolutely has a role. It has great capabilities when properly leveraged, but the thing that AI can't be is human. It just can't. It um, it I can almost smell it when I get an AI message these days, or someone sends me a beautiful PowerPoint deck. You can just feel within that perfection, there's no humanity. Maybe it's because of the perfection. I don't know, and maybe AI will get better at faking humanness, but up to this point, I'm not seeing it. And I think it's causing employees to feel deflated, to feel like, oh, okay, so you were happy to have me around, but now you have something faster, better, cheaper, and if you can get it to replace me, um, that's probably the direction that you're heading. What does that tell me about how you really think about the people that you work with? Um, and AI is just maybe the most recent example. We've seen lots of examples of um, employers saying one thing, "Hey, we're all a family. Oh, we're all a team. We're in this together," but then doing another to
Yeah.
communicate something totally different.
Yeah. I mentioned that feeling of safety, and I've often thought that safety with other people, safety in your work is kind of a byproduct of alignment. And when I say alignment, I mean that if what the employer, what the company stands for, the words on the wall, the words in the front of the website, then that has to translate into how the company behaves. What is said, what is done. And it's almost like an equation, because when those thoughts and those words and behaviors line up, then the output and the way that people feel about it is often more safe. But like you said, if things are being said and we're a family, but the behavior doesn't match that, the communication, the way that a difficult, unexpected situation is dealt with, then it's kind of meaningless. And a lot of people in this workforce have been through that a number of times. The baby boomers that are still working are wise, and been through so much, and yet they've seen a lot of change. I'm in Gen X, and things have changed a lot. I remember being out as a salesperson without a phone. I literally have to stop. I was working in New York City. I used to have to stop and get on a payphone like 4 or 5 times a day just to check voicemail. That didn't include the times that I was making customer calls and stuff. I had a map on my lap, trying to figure out where I was going versus
I
GPS.
remember.
So much has changed. But I mentioned the generations to say that there are also 2 subsequent younger generations that are in or entering the workforce. And so the needs and the mindset of those different groups is also very different. So I'm maybe digressing from where we were with AI, but they're so unique. These groups are so unique. Their mindset, the way they show up in the world, how they spend their time, how they get things done is so different that those levels of engagement, those feelings of loyalty to leaders, loyalty to an organization, they're the source of that is different. And so it's not an easy thing to figure out, but you have to try. You have to try, and same thing with AI.
I know some leaders flip to the other extreme, where they go from warrior to just caring, And of course, caring is important. Love is important. Seeing your employees is important. But if you index totally in that direction, that also in its own way feels a little hollow. And this is I had a bit of an aha experience when I was reading your second book, about halfway through, and I don't remember if it was a specific story that you shared, or as I just sat back on my deck and I set the book down, and I was from my laptop. I was reading it on my tablet, and I was thinking through, the thing I'm getting now is that you have some leaders who are reacting to this new world by getting heavier. They're getting more about accountability, more about control. I need to bring you back into the office. I need to be able to see you. I need to be able to track you. But then you have others who have indexed toward, hey, it's all about love and trust and family and psychological safety and all the good things, all good. But if it's nothing but that, I think that also feels hollow to many employees. And they may end up liking you, appreciating you as a manager or a leader, but you may not be driving them the way that you could be driving them. And I mean drive not in a drive sense, but in a sense of motivating, energizing, inspiring, moving them to action in a way that you could be. And that's really what I think we yearn for, is that leader who sees us, who we respect, who we feel has competence and character, and then sees us and respects us. We'll fight for those kinds of leaders, but they're getting more and more rare.
Yeah, it's a huge ask of someone to nail it on all those levels, right? And I don't profess to be an expert on leadership. I've just joined the conversation. What I do think is that it is an art form, and there's a story I tell in the first book about being on a mountain climb in Colorado, and it was a long day. It was a 13-hour hike, and we were not free climbing up steep rock. It was a very challenging hike on challenging terrain, different temperatures, and that type of thing. But to sort of expedite the story, we had a guide. His name was Thor. Thor. Speaking of Viking lore, and I noticed that in the beginning, it was dark out. We got up at like 3:00 in the morning, and he was out in front, and we were following him, and it was cold, and nobody really wanted to be there. As soon as we kind of got our groove on, and the sun came out, and it was getting a little bit warmer, he moved to the back, and would like shout something out here or there, and all through maybe more of the middle section of the hike. And then as we got toward the summit, maybe the last third of the hike, and we stopped a number of times, there were some injuries, dehydration, sprained ankles, change your socks because you're getting blisters. He moved around. He would come up beside somebody and check in on them and give them some encouragement, tighten your shoes. And through some conversation with him, some retrospective thoughts, I was like, he's inspiring from the front, getting us going, showing us the way. He's leading from the back, watching and giving us guidance verbally, encouragement, and then coaching people amidst the group and moving around and making those coaching conversations of encouragement and try this, try that within the group. And so that's just a corollary to what we're talking about, where it's a difficult thing to do. It's an art form. And I believe someone who's truly committed to being that caring warrior, that life-giving sword, is also committed to the multitudes of what that is,
Yeah.
and developing on different levels, as opposed to saying, here's the situation. We've got all these different types of employees, and all these people from different generations, and this is how it's going to be. Versus the, as you said, maybe overly soft and squishy, and nothing's getting done, and people are getting away with things that they shouldn't be, and you're sort of sliding into chaos. It's pulling those pieces together and working on them constantly. That's the art in it, and that's a huge commitment. And I think that's, it's not simple, but I think that concept is what's required to be an effective leader.
You learn that lesson as a parent, as a father, that there's the push and pull. There is the inspiring. There is the driving. It's like as at least for me as a father, even to this day, with a 27-year-old man that is my son, I'm still watching all the time. I'm eagle-eyed watching, and I'm looking to make sure he's okay. His life is good, and when he's okay, then I can kind of relax and feel okay. But I am reminded that my own father said to me years ago, "It never ends. You actually never stop with that ever so slight anxiety, wanting to make sure that your young one is okay." And keeping them on the nudging a little here, guiding a little there, giving a little bit of freedom, letting them fall, letting them stumble, letting them get hurt when that getting hurt serves them. And I think what you describe is hard. That
Very hard.
As a metaphor for leadership, if you're leading a team, to be metaphorically thinking through, when should I be in front? When should I be in back? When should I be aside? I should be watching all of them? Who needs a hydration break? Who needs a little boost? And yet, that is the caring warrior. That is the person who is, I'm gonna get you all to the top of the summit, because we agreed that's where we want to get. We won't feel good about this day if we end up 20 feet short from the top of the summit. We're going to get there, and I'm going to help ensure that everybody gets there and we can celebrate it together.
Yeah.
But that's going to require me to be watching and guiding and nudging and coaching and all of the things.
Yeah.
And I think maybe part of what's challenging in today's world of work is that leaders are under enormous pressure to get more done. They have more direct reports than ever before. Organizations have been flattened, so we've eliminated layers of management. So they have more to accomplish. I especially feel for leaders who are player coaches. Hey, we expect you to, what's the sales phrase? We expect you to carry a bag while also leading a team of salespeople. Like, we expect you to be accountable for some individual contributor work and also lead these 12 people or lead these 8 people. Man, that is tough to find the time and the mental and emotional energy to lead. Yeah. So do you have any, what would be the right word? Do you have any guidance for people who intellectually track with everything you're saying, but get a little exhausted just thinking about it?
Well, we put time and effort into creating strategic plans, business plans, marketing plans. I guess I would say something smart to do is to take the stuff that you need internally, your mental energy, your emotional energy, your spiritual energy, and be discerning about that as well. We do tend to think that that stuff is just fluffy, or that stuff just doesn't matter. But if we can be more intentional about taking care of ourselves and recharging our batteries, and work-life balance, I know that's way too overused. I think it comes down to more of a personal inventory. And I referenced earlier traveling, I operated at what I thought was a relatively normal set point. And I was running out of gas. I mean, I was literally breaking down, and just had my foot on the pedal and thought that things were going well, and had, mini first midlife crisis, whatever. And so I think that, just off the cuff, an answer to that question is, my advice would be to be more intentional about taking care of yourself. Have some quiet time. Do your hobbies. Spend time with the people that you love. Be present. Find more joy in life. I know life is difficult. I know that there are plenty of challenges. I have them in my life right now, and will continue to. But if we can be more intentional about some of those things, and I talk about it in the book, but that can really help. And that ties back to what we're talking about with a leader. If they're not sort of walking that talk or talking that walk, then people will know it and people will see it. And so it has to be demonstrated. The warrior, the convictions, showing up, standing up for what's right, behaving that way, but also the part where you care about people and you check in and how are you? And I'm interested to know a little bit more about your life, and how's the job going, and do you feel like you're getting what you need, et cetera, et cetera. In order to be able to do that as a leader, which I think matters, and that could be a parent, that could be, people in the medical profession, nurses, doctors, so many examples. You can't just show up every day and burn yourself down to the ground and just do the job and just think about it for all the practical reasons. If we're not taking care of ourselves, as a human being, and taking some inventory on that, then we have limited bandwidth.
And in that spirit, I think there's some element of just our raw physicality that we can't ignore, no matter what age. Whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s. You and I are both men of a certain age who can remember when cell phones were the size of bricks, and I know that for me, I can no longer just assume. That there were years where I could push through. I could through sheer force of will. I need to do an all-nighter. I need to push out 3 reports this evening after dinner. I need to do whatever. I remember. It's not a contest, but I'm going to say, I remember I was in a sales role, and I was in a job where I had to go from office to office, and I carried. Do you remember the old TV VCR recorders? They're like 2 foot by 2 foot squares with a little handle, and my job was to go in, meet with the decision maker, and then corporate had created a little 8-minute video that I was supposed to play for them. Now, in hindsight, when I look back, such a lame selling cycle. It's just horrible.
And,
however,
they didn't have a TV or a monitor for you to use to even plug your thing into, right?
Well,
that would ruin it.
Yes. So it was determined that we should each carry our own TV VCR, and nobody had laptops back then. It was in fact it was the most efficient way to make it happen. But I guess at the time, I could do that. Now today, I feel like I have to just be that much more attentive to my health, my energy, my diet, my exercise, all of those things, because there's no spare room. There's no wiggle room anymore. And I know if my energy wanes,
Mm.
the caring side of my warrior goes away. And I still, just to this day, if I get too run down, I
Oh
can
yeah,
be I can be kind of jerky. I can be cynical. I can be edgy, and and I um and
same
I
here.
it's not good. And then I end up circling back the next day when I feel a little better, and apologizing, and then I write little post-it notes to myself to make sure, do not let yourself degrade that way, because it's not good for them, it's not good for me. um the
Think about how many people walk around. I mean, I get hangry. Uh, I need to eat. I think about it all the time, all day. What am I going to eat? That's just one thing. But I've gone through times where I was just pretty grumpy for a while.
yeah,
You know, you've read some of my stories, but that awareness that you're not at your best is great, and no one's going to have you know be dancing on daisies all every day all day long. But the worst parts of us can come out um, when we're run down,
well, you
and we
tell
just
a
are
story
limited.
in chapter 9 of the new book, and I've thought about this. I think it would be best, just, I'm going to say to people who are watching this, when it comes out in September, buy the book Awaken Your Power by TJ Jones. Don't go straight to chapter 9. I would say, read the whole book, but in anticipation of chapter 9. Now, even as I say those words, now I'm thinking, am I building this thing up too much? Like, are they going to get to chapter 9 and just really be gearing up? It's I will say, I got halfway through chapter 9, and I set it aside because I was being triggered, remembering my own shoelace moment. It wasn't as dramatic as yours. It was not, but it was a moment of deep defeat, like deep defeat, and
Yeah,
feeling like it was hopeless. Um, I I had promised myself I would never leave my wife and son for long periods of time, and I was being forced to do it just by financial necessity. And I sat down in our basement alone, thinking, this is exactly what I promised to never do. I promised them I would never do it. I promised myself I would never do it, and yet I'm about to do it. It was horrible, and it had its own downside. I mean, a lot of things happened from there. It didn't get better quickly, and so. But I think those moments, and the eventual recovery from those moments, I think those are a big part of what make us who we are as leaders. I know it informs who I am as a leader, a husband, a father today. Um, and and when I work with someone who's having their own moment of hopelessness, their own moment of feeling like it can't get better, or it's not going to get better. I mean, I don't do the lame thing of saying, "Oh, you think you have it rough? Well, let me tell you my story." I don't do that, but I do want to help them see this will pass. We will get through, and no matter how bad it may be, we will get through. We just maybe can't see right now what that path is ultimately going to be. Um, is there anything, um, in terms of the lessons from chapter 9, that you'd like to share, without actually telling the story, because I want to leave it for people to actually read and experience? But that was a pretty powerful final chapter.
thank you. It was very difficult to share, and I debated many times whether or not to share that story in the book. I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to
Yeah.
give things away. I think it's more powerful to not know details, but we suffer as human beings, and every story through from now all the way back to the beginning is driven forward, is compelled by conflict, by difficulty, by uncertainty, by challenge. And these are the movies and the plot lines that draw us in.
Yeah.
Uh, the story, the fictional books that we read, it always has conflict and huge hurdles to overcome. And that idea that everything is going to be okay, that once I get to this stage, or once I get uh, to this age, or once I've finished with, my degree,
Mhm.
once I get this job, it's almost like a naive part of human nature is
Yeah.
to want that, but we think we've arrived, and we don't. We're faced with difficulty and challenge throughout our lives. And for me, this was one of several challenges I've had, but this was that time of deep despair. And it makes for a great story. It wasn't fun living it, but it has it's changed everything. And I'm at this point actually happy and proud to share that story. I got over the fear, and I know that everyone has had that shoelace moment. And so I hope that they will feel empowered by it, they will feel seen and understood,
Mhm.
and have, hope and belief, and want to be more of that person who has compassion and empathy for others, and wow, actually do something about that as well.
And I will say that's exactly the little journey that I went through in that moment. First, I was triggered to remember my own moment, but then as I finished reading the chapter, and then I set it aside and I was sitting with it, and the big thing that came over me was that most of the people I work with, I don't know which of them is going through their own moment, but they all go through them. We all go
Oh
through them.
yeah,
It is, and for leaders who are trying to follow this caring warrior path, it's a hard path. I mean,
it's the harder path.
yeah, and it's if we look at it as two paths, and it's not really two paths, but if I think about, if you want to be an effective leader warrior, that brings its own challenges. The the,
Oh
the,
yeah,
the warrior spirit, to be able to step in, to do battle, to stand for something, that energy, that that is hard. That other side, that caring side, to care, to love, to see, to know, to do something about what you see and know, that's also really hard. And probably none of us gets it right, even most of the time. If you
that's
can
right.
weave your way through and
Yeah,
get it right more often than not, or even just a little more often than you have in the past, give yourself some grace, and just accept that you're getting more better, day by day, step by step. But
we
then
keep going.
also, yeah, and then keep paying attention to the people around you, the people that you lead, and I would say especially the people that you lead. We sometimes forget that even though it's just the workplace, people need leadership, and they yearn for leadership, and they imbue their leaders with power. The moment someone has a leadership role over you, a hierarchical role over you, like it or not, I think maybe it's just the way we are built as human beings. We want to please that person. We want that
Absolutely.
person to respect and know and like us, and we want to like them. We have expectations, and you know what it's like when the person who leads you or is 2 or 3 layers up sees you in a meeting, laughs at your joke, nods at your idea, sends you an email saying, "Hey, could you tell me more about that thing that you mentioned to me?" Just little bits of recognition can fill someone's day, and
Oh, tremendously.
we don't know who amongst us needs their day to be filled today. So every meeting, every engagement has an opportunity for the leader to boost up that person in small ways and big ways. And I as how would I characterize myself? I'm a neurodiverse, shy engineer. And I sometimes forget that I'm in these meetings that I have with people. It's more than just a data exchange. It's an exchange of energy between people. And when I
Absolutely.
do remember, when I'll write myself a post-it note to remind myself to try to boost others today. And then when I do, I'm amazed to see what happens when you see how they light up. I'm just one of those people though that needs to be continuously nudged to do that. So I try to nudge myself.
It's hard if you're an introvert. I'm going to say you're probably an introverted extrovert, which means that you can operate. I think this is what it means. You can operate in that world of you can
Yeah,
be out there and communicate and stuff, but your natural tendency is to be, like you said, a little more shy and a little more, you know, withdrawn. Not in a bad way, but it takes a lot of effort, and sometimes that effort, regardless of what our personality type is to just be where you are. Just
yeah,
be there. I I find myself often I zigzag all over the grocery store. I don't know where anything is. I'm here, I'm there, and I'm in my own world thinking about all this different stuff. And then I'll get to the cash register, and for whatever moment, I just sort of slow down, and you see someone who's looks sad, or the person at the cash register looks exhausted, or whatever, and a little smile, maybe a joke. I was singing with with one of the cash registers or the person packing the bags not too long ago, and they first looked at me and thought I was crazy, and I thought it was fun, and
uh-huh.
just those moments, those small little moments of bringing yourself back to where you are, being there, making eye contact, getting out of our own head, getting out of over analyzing everything, and uh, appreciating just now, right
Yeah,
now, is the only moment that you have right now. And easier said than done, maybe a little trite. I know that that's out there, book titles and phrases, but I really do find in my life, especially after the ups and downs, that when I'm able to be right where I am, my work is better, my concentration is better, and most importantly, my relationships are better.
yeah. I
So,
think for me, the reason the metaphor of the life-giving sword resonated so much and still resonates so much is that, and I might be over or misinterpreting this, but this is what makes it work for me, is I recognize that the sword is also dangerous. The sword, when it is no longer life giving, like my sword, I can do the same thing. I can bring life. I can bring life to a conversation, to a discussion, to another person. And if I'm having a bad day, and that life giving part of it kind of fades, that life giving flame fades,
mhm.
and it's just the sword, man, I can cut. I can. It's not pretty. I just have my humor can get very cutting. I can be very cynical. I can be very just not good. And I have to recognize. I have to remind myself that's a power. It's a power that a person has, and I need to make sure that I leverage that power in a life-giving way. I think of it as a life-giving, like in my mind, a life-giving sword is a flaming sword, like a flame of life. That's the image I've created in my mind. And when that flame goes out, then it's just a sword and it's dangerous. And I need to be pulling that in, if at all possible. So what I love, I don't want to be respectful of your time, so we'll wrap up here shortly. But I just want to say, you have, through the two books, you've embedded so many ideas in my head, so many metaphors, so many visuals in my head. It's been very helpful for me personally, and I'm sure others. I mean, you've shared the second book with others as well, and I know you've gotten some great feedback so far. And I just would recommend to anybody, no matter where you are in your life, whether you're in a formal leadership role or if it's just for you about self-leadership, learning to lead yourself, there's a lot of value in this book, Awaken the Power by T.J. Jones. And we'll include the link in the show notes, so people don't have to search too much to find it. Any final thoughts you want to share, TJ?
I'll just say that I think we've all bought into a lie, and the lie is that strength is that power and dominance, and really strength comes from love. It comes from your heart and your intentions. And I think the book really is all about, at the most basic level, talking about that. And so there's humor, there's some funny stories, some of which I make fun of myself and tell some stories about goofy things that I've done. But there are also some real serious stories, and some vulnerable things for me, and some very inspirational stories of other people, and hopefully some good, strong concepts that people can take away and revisit at times when they need to. So I wish we talked more about your book, but we can do that.
No, it'll have its time. It will have its time. It comes out in December, so there'll be plenty of time at that point.
Yeah. Well, the book comes out the week of 10th of September. I'm not sure if that's a Monday or Tuesday right now, but that week.
There's a pre-order link, I'm assuming, available now, or is there? Can people pre-order
now? There
will
be within the next week.
Okay. As soon as there is, send it to me, and I'll make sure I include it in the show notes so people can go and click on the pre-order link. That's fantastic. TJ Jones, Awaken the Power. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.